You're with the Breaker-Leggers, and we are in the beautiful Stratford Upon Avon at the RSC
to see the world premiere musical, Miss Littlewood.
So stay tuned to find out how many legs,
whether it's break a leg
or leg it. Amazing people go any further,
to make sure you've always got your finger on the theatrical pulse,
to make sure you are up to date with our latest honest reviews, news and interviews,
just pop down and hit subscribe now.
Yeah, comment below about this video, this show, any shows whatsoever. Join our Lega Theatre community.
We love to have a conversation with you, so join the fun. Right.
So we've got to say, Stratford Upon Avon is a beautiful place.
It really is.
Birthplace of Shakespeare.
It is the birthplace of Shakespeare, but as if you didn't know that already, I mean, it's really drummed home at school, isn't it? But maybe you've been off-put by seeing something Shakespeare because it's quite alienating. But if you come to the RSC, it's not just Shakespeare.
They don't just do Shakespeare; they do all sorts, and it's pretty central. It's a couple of hours from London, depending where you are. I'm sure you could get to Stratford, and we recommend you do. So, what are they showing today?
Today, in the Swan Theatre space, which is their slightly smaller space here, they've got two main theatres, is Miss Littlewood. Now, it's a brand new musical with book, music and lyrics by Sam Kenyon and directed by Erica Wyman. It tells the true life story of maverick theatre director Joan Littlewood as she rises from South London working class gal right up to legendary theatre crusader.
Okay, I don't know anything about Miss Littlewood, is it?
Yeah, well, Joan is credited with revolutionising 20th century theatre with her theatre workshop and discovered such talents as Barbara Windsor and created musicals such as Oh What a Lovely War. Now, interestingly, the director and writer for this musical were inspired to create this piece after working together on Oh What a Lovely War.
Oh,
not the original
lovely.
Production though, because that was a long time ago.
Okay, anything else we need to know about this?
Well, I think it's important to mention that the RSC's got a fairly good legacy when it comes to musicals. Most recently with the Tim Minchin musical Matilda.
Yep.
Played here, I mean, it premiered here a few years ago now before heading into London's West End, where it is still playing
at the Cambridge Theatre.
At the Cambridge, and it's out on a UK tour as well.
Did well on Broadway as well?
I mean, it did okay on Broadway. It didn't run and run, but it didn't flop as hard as Carrie,
which is also another RSC musical. But that's going back some, right?
Yeah, to the 1980s. I mean, the original production was panned and absolutely slated, but it's had revivals and rewrites since then. We saw it at the Southwark Playhouse a few years ago, and it was great.
So there's potential for this. How long is it?
2 hours and 20 minutes plus a 20-minute interval, which is when we'll be catching you next for our 30-second breakdown. And stay tuned to find out how many legs.
We've come to the interval, which means it's time for the Breaker-Leggers 30-second interval breakdown. Go! What do you think so far?
I love the concept. Joan Littlewood, sort of the older Joan, is directing younger actresses in her life and giving them stage direction, and there's an interactivity about it that I really, really like. Musicality wise, I'm unsold. What about you?
I'm not sold. I thought it started off really strong in terms of the concept, incorporating the audience as well. The older Joan is great. However, I'm not sold by all the other Joans, and the story is a bit meh.
We've come to the end, and I bet you're wondering whether we'll be changing our major to Joan Littlewood. So what were your thoughts on this?
That's such an obscure reference.
Comment
below if you've got that.
Yeah,
okay?
it is quite
Let us
obscure.
know what reference that was.
I'm quite an obscure sort of guy.
So what do we make of that? Well, the second act for me was better. However, still not sold. So we need to break this right down. I think that she has a really good story to tell. The story of Joan Littlewood is a really interesting story.
By and large, I would say there are certain moments of her, what they have portrayed her to be in this, which are a little bit confused, but we'll come on to that in a minute.
Regardless of before we even get on to how this production tells her story, I can tell from the essences of what they set up at the very beginning, she has an interesting story to tell. The idea of this bastard child that she was, born out of wedlock at a time when that was like a big thing. Also being a female trying to push forward in a male-dominated area of arts.
In a male-dominated world, which, you know, by and large we still live in, but certainly in the 1940s, I mean, can you imagine?
Coming from a place of poverty and quite common, and she got a scholarship to RADA, but she wasn't conforming to what theatre was at the time, and this kind of where you have to talk good and proper when delivering Shakespeare, kind of pushing against the boundaries of that is interesting as well. Around the Second World War, where art was censored by the Lord Chamberlain, he could say what went and what wasn't, what couldn't go, kind of freedom of speech was being censored. So the backdrop of really interesting stuff.
Exactly, it was sort of an exciting time for her, and she pioneered, you know, what we have come to accept about theatre, which is a spirit of openness and inclusion and all of those things that we now take for granted. She put herself out there, and that is an interesting thing.
That sounds interesting, right? However, it wasn't sold anywhere near as interesting as
it
that.
is.
Like, that sounds interesting. I'm interested. How could they lose in that?
And I think
2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is a prime example of somebody, you know, thinking that's a good idea, and then almost forcing a concept on what is just by basics alone a sort of good story, to try and make it into something that they thought was exciting. And as a result, it came a lot across to me as rather self-indulgent. I had a feeling that the people that were enjoying this the most were the director and the writer, certainly not the audience.
Yeah, the concept that they've set up in its writing, again, sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
Having the ensemble, the female ensemble, playing Joan at different parts through her life, almost like how an actor's career, you're given the opportunity, then it's taken away, then it's given to you and it's taken away. That seems to be the theme of that was tapped into for these Joans. They were given the opportunity to play, and then it's right, okay, your chance is over, we're going on to the next. And so it sounds good, and for the first couple of bits it was nice, but that's only for me as strong as the actors playing that part, which were inconsistent. The second act Joans were far stronger for me than the first act Joans.
We had, I mean, around 6 different actresses playing the part of Joan. And yes, you're right, there were some stronger than others. I mean, I've never seen an interview with Joan Littlewood. I don't know what she was like as a person. I don't know how she carried herself, how she spoke, or how she portrayed it. But if you are sort of trying to portray a real life person, there's got to be a little bit of consistency there in both the choices that you're making as an actor in order to portray them and the strength of what you're doing. And yes, you're right, that was hit and miss. Not to single out a single person, although we will single out a single person.
I will single out a person because it's linked to that note. You're right, I don't know who Joan Littlewood was. The only benchmark I have is the Joan who was being played by the older Joan.
Claire Burt was playing the Joan of now, as it were, even though she died in 2002. But the older Joan.
Who was fantastic.
Yes,
she
absolutely.
was brilliant. She stole the show, and from the start then set the benchmark for what this feisty, kind of tyrannical, driven,
very
straight talking Joan would be. And she did that with natural flair, off the cuff, and
that's the point. She lived that part, and
the others
no one else could then reach the same level.
Especially in the early parts, didn't pinch that. Even though they're playing an earlier version of Joan, just didn't have what I would call the stagecraft and the grounding of that the older Joan had. The later second act Joans were better actors and did manage to capture some of that essence of Joan.
I absolutely agree. I think it's important that we come on, because this is a musical. We've talked a lot about the story and about the book. This is a musical. There are songs that are intertwined with the plot, and not a single one of them was memorable.
No, I'm
That's
trying
the
to think.
real problem. I mean, there was one nice number in Act 1 where I thought, okay, this has got musicality, and it was actually about a point of one of the characters having an abortion. No spoilers, but the sort of
A nice number about an abortion.
Yeah, I know it seems like a bit of a contradiction, but no, it was actually, in terms of musicality and acting through song, there were some really nice moments in that one number, but that was it, literally it for me.
There was a number in the second act, again it's just gone, that I thought actually that's quite nice. Again, it's lost, I don't know what it was. The numbers just merged and almost a bit superfluous for me.
Yeah, absolutely superfluous. I would talk a little bit about choreography, but there's a movement director in by the way of Lucy Hind, but do you know what, in terms of choreography there wasn't really any.
Okay, I gotta say I did like Greg Barnett. I thought he was very good.
In the roles of Robert Littlewood, Jimmy Miller and Cedric Price.
They all played multiple parts actually, so they did some nice stuff. I also liked Amanda Haddingui. Hopefully, I have no idea if that's said that right. I've got no benchmark. I thought she was great as well. And also, I liked Sandy Foster,
who played Joan at a certain point in her life. So
there were key performances that stood out for me. There were the Joans,
but certainly no one that reached the dizzying heights of Claire Burt as the main Joan, who was just phenomenal.
Loved her. Loved you.
I would love to sort of talk more about what I enjoyed about it, but it'd be a very short conversation, unfortunately. I just found it a bit of a wasted opportunity to tell a rather interesting story about rather an interesting woman. A woman who is throughout the piece heralded as a champion of women.
Okay, I'm glad we're coming on to this point.
Independence, and of actually being a pioneer in a male-driven world, who at the very end of the show falls apart at the death of her man and becomes a stereotypical snivelling woman who can't live without a man. And do you know what? It undid everything that I wanted to believe about Joan Littlewood by that point. I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe there was something about her where she had this hard exterior, and then her life did fall apart after she suffered loss. But do you know what? It didn't do her any favours, and I just felt like, wow. And at the end of the show, I was like, are we really going to leave it there? Is that it? That's it? She achieved nothing after that, and so it felt. Oh, and that was. What, you know, which I suppose is a tragedy if it's true, but it was also really unfulfilling.
Yeah, it's really difficult because we don't know what happened, and I don't want to undermine the loss of losing someone that is so close, and if that is what happened. But the way it's portrayed in this is that everything she did was because of a man, or only had value because of a man, which goes completely against
it. Yeah, it wasn't set
what
up
everything else
earlier.
was set up as, and it left me very confused as to.
It left me cold, and I felt rather upset about it. I felt rather uncomfortable with that as a sort of as a culmination of the show and what I thought it was. And do you know what? I'm still confused now, and. I don't want to. I like to leave fulfilled. I feel like I'm a little bit unfulfilled.
Is there anything else we want to comment on before you lose all of your?
No, I like this show. I peaked early on. I really
it started with so much promise. Well, I guess you're probably wondering how many legs we are going to give Miss Littlewood.
Miss Littlewood the musical, currently at the RSC and probably only ever at the RSC. We are going to give, as a fly just goes in my ear.
Two legs.
Yeah, I mean, there were some nice moments. The story is, was interesting and had promise. It just wasn't fulfilled.
Concept had some promising moments.
The concept was fairly original. This stepping into the lives of your younger self and directing it. At some points, trying to change history because you didn't want to live that uncomfortable moment
trying
again.
To change the past,
which was interesting.
Trying to rewrite it again. Good ideas,
but
just
not
never
fully realised here.
Again, using the audience in certain moments was nice. Breaking that fourth wall. It is some nice moments, but just never
enough to kind of get us over the crest of the hill.
Yeah, just kind of left a bit almost bored at times, just a bit like, but
But Claire
committed
Burt,
cast.
though, Claire Burt.
Worth seeing just
Wow.
for her.
Yeah, Claire
Yeah,
Burt,
and
wow.
I'd happily see her in something else.
I
But hey,
would say this was more of a Carrie than a Matilda, and if you do want to see this piece, I would definitely head to Stratford because I would be very surprised if it had a life after here.
because hey, that's just what we
It's just
thought.
what we thought.
Yeah, please let us know what
Yeah,
you
and you know
think.
what? If you did have a difference of opinion, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. So
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know why and how, and maybe we missed something. Who knows? Anyway, we're the Breaker Leggers,
And we'll catch you again soon. Bye.